All right, let's get the meeting called to order. Let's start with roll call.
I'm here.
Mr. Monica?
Here.
Ms. Edlund?
Present.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Washington?
Here.
Ms. Allen?
Here?
Mr. Finnegan?
Here.
Okay, we're going to skip the approval of minutes for now because we're not sure that everybody's had a chance to look at those yet. So are we going to have public input?
I don't believe so.
Okay, all right, then we're going to move on to new business, which is the approval of the 2020 Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants.
We will hold just a moment.
Oh, sure.
Did you want to make an announcement before we get started? Okay. We actually do have an announcement.
Oh, okay, sure.
All right, is the meeting going right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're on. Places, please.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to introduce our new Economic Development Coordinator, Stephanie McMahon.
Hello,
Oh,
nice to
oh,
meet you.
hi.
Hi.
So Stephanie joins us, I'm going to blank on the name of the chamber,
Sullivan Chamber and Economic Development.
where she spent 13 years, and she's done other work since then. But we're excited to be working with Steph. She has a lot of events experience in addition to the economic development side. So there's plenty of opportunity here for more collaboration with the Arts and Culture program as we move forward.
Very good.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, we'll go ahead with new business.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning for our special meeting. This is a meeting to determine the Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants for Cycle 2020. I want to give a little background first and foremost and ask you to reference your timeline sheet. This was actually given out to commissioners a couple meetings back with the intention of just laying out kind of what the actual Tier 3 evaluation timeline looks like. So just to kind of go over those one more time, we had a deadline this year of November 1st. Tier 3 applicants presented to the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission on the 12th. Commissioners heard presentations at that meeting. They received paper copies of all applications and later scoring sheets and copies of those applications again through Dropbox. And commissioners asked clarifying and follow-up questions at that meeting. We then gave an opportunity for commissioners to submit then a paper copy of your individual evaluations of each Tier 3 applicant, as well as your worksheet of funding distribution for Tier 3 in this cycle. Then here at this meeting, December 4th, and you'll see that these dates have changed since we did have to reschedule this meeting. Our December 4th meeting today is really intended to be not only a presentation of the recommendation that was put together by staff with your evaluations, so informed by your evaluations, both qualitative and quantitative, but also to allow for a discussion to ensue here. So this is your opportunity to discuss these more in depth. And you could ask for both. You can discuss your individual assessments in open forum. You can debate the merits and voice any challenges or concerns. You can make a motion to accept, revise, or reject the proposal. I'll go over that in more detail in a moment. But one way or another, this is your invitation to truly discuss today. So that's what we invite you to do. And of course, before we conclude the meeting today, we will ask for a final vote on Tier 3 funding to be cast at this meeting. Our intention is that hopefully by later today, we'll get notification out to all applicants. And if not, by the end of the business day tomorrow, all will have received official notice about the results. Now, of course, if they're here with us today, they may know before the end of this meeting. So let me just take a moment to introduce our memo today, and I also will at one point call up Heather Ann to also talk to you a little bit more in depth about how we arrive at the recommendation that you have in front of you. So this recommendation, which was also included in the packets available online and was sent out to both the applicants and all of the commissioners, I'm going to largely kind of present it, not reading it entirely, but I'm going to give you kind of a summary. So this is the Tier 3 Arts Grants recommendation for the cycle of 2020. The Urbana Arts and Culture Commission's grant program offers artists and artistic groups supportive funding for creative projects within the city of Urbana. This 2020 cycle allows for $80,000 to be available and awarded to artists, arts organizations, and festival presenters. The Tier 3 grant category specifically supports special events and festivals and offers between $5,000 and $10,000 in financial support. In this category this year, we have $35,000 available to be awarded to festival and special event presenters. Our commission, just as I described, reviewed 4 applications this cycle and received corresponding presentations from each applicant in a special meeting. We also received a subsequent video presentation. The next step is for the Arts and Culture Commission to make a funding determination in this category. So, as with all of our memos, we offer 3 options. The commission may approve the recommendation of Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants. You may approve the recommendation of Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants with revisions, or you could deny the recommendation of the Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants. You also have the opportunity, if you so choose, to take each applicant one at a time, or you could take the recommendation as a whole. Staff recommends the commission approve the recommendation of Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants as presented. And before I do that, this is the point at which I'd like to invite Heather Ann to come, and we'll just talk a little bit about what we do to arrive at that number. Okay? And for any of you who may not recall, Heather Ann is our program specialist serving both the Urbana Arts and Culture Program and Urbana's Market at the Square.
Thank you, Rachel. Members of the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission, I present to you the funding recommendation from Urbana Arts and Culture staff for the Urbana Tier 3 Arts Grants. These recommendations were concluded based upon a combination of your scores and proposed funding. Each Tier 3 Arts Grant applicant was assigned a score in 3 categories by each member of the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission. These scores were tallied, ranking the applicants highest to lowest. Each Tier 3 Art Grant applicant was assigned a proposed award amount by each member of the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission. The most common proposed award amount, or mode, of each applicant was taken into consideration for funding recommendation. And finally, qualitative evaluations were taken into consideration for funding recommendations. Attached, you will find the past award history of each Tier 3 Arts Grant applicant for your review.
All right. So that brings us to the recommendation this year. For the cycle of 2020, Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots Festival, presented by Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots, has a funding recommendation of $9,500. The 2020 Pygmalion, presented by Fine Bersoni Inc., has a funding recommendation of $9,500. The 2020 Boneyard Arts Festival presentation from 40 North 88 West has a funding recommendation of $8,000. And the 2020 Urbana Sweet Corn Festival, presented by Urbana Business Association, has a funding recommendation of $8,000. As you can see, we do have some additional exhibits. I just want to point them out. Those include a summary of your qualitative comments on evaluations from the Commission on each applicant, as well as the funding history that Heather Ann spoke of, but the funding history of each applicant. And that includes, just so that I can clarify these tables, includes both past recipient receipt of things like the Urbana Arts Grants, or formerly Public Arts Grants, as well as city sponsorship through what was formerly the city's special event funding. For newer commissioners or folks joining us today, it's important to just note that a few years ago, not so long ago, special event funding was asked and given out at the behest of the City Council, and this was a direct ask. A couple years ago at this point, the Urbana Arts and Culture Commission assumed responsibility for distributing that funding. And when we assumed that responsibility, we incorporated that into our grants program. So that is why we have both these listed. So there is a past history of some of these applicants of receiving both funding sources. Some have received one or the other, but we present them here so that you can see the past history in total. This, of course, does not include perhaps things like operating support or other kinds of support that on occasion certain applicants may have with the city in general. This is specific to their festivals. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that information. But at this time, we want to invite you to discuss and make a motion when you feel ready. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as well.
Might be a minute.
I was really wanting to see all of them get 10,000, and there was no way to do that.
No.
Can you make sure your mic's on? Yeah.
I was really hoping to see all of the grantees get 10,000 and realized that that wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So it was a real challenge to look at that and had to make some tough decisions about it. And I appreciate the work that the staff put in to come with a final proposal, which to me looks very fair, you know, given the type of activities that are presented.
She was going to say something.
I'm sorry, who?
I thought she was going to say something.
Oh.
You
Does
were
anyone-
shaking your
oh.
head as if you were preparing to say something.
Oh, okay.
Thought you were taking a breath to speak. Sorry.
Does anyone have any questions, comments?
I will.
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
No, go ahead. You're on the outside. Easy.
I was just curious, in the, find my sheet here, in the previously, the funding histories,
Yes.
if there's any place, or if there's any way to include the funding support, like you said, there's some city support that comes through the different programming, if there's any way to talk about that or include that somehow? For instance, like, I know we have, Urbana does also do some boneyard programming, which comes with some funding as well. I don't know if that's the case also with the other ones, with Sweet Corn maybe, I don't know if there's any way to include that information.
Well, most of that information is public, so is definitely searchable. But it's also important to note that, and I'll speak from my perspective as the arts coordinator, but the challenge I find with some of these questions is that we always want to encourage collaboration, right, and encourage participating in each other's events and that sort of thing. So I included, and some of you did as well in your narrative evaluations, the notation about, and I'm thinking kind of specifically about two of the applicants right now, who, through collaboration, have the arts and culture program also contributing budgetary monies towards the festival because we collaborate with the festival. But at the same time, we're collaborating with, these festivals out of the desire for the arts program to have sort of a relevancy and a role there too. So I think there's that balance of wanting to both obviously note and be mindful of the different ways in which support is given, but to also always encourage that to happen. We could certainly explore that for a future year, pulling together other kinds of information if that can be helpful. But the thing that's important to us is staying true to this being an evaluation of the festival itself and not of support of other kinds for other activities within the organization, because what we're evaluating is one activity. Does that make sense?
Go ahead.
I just want to add to that. So when that column again for city sponsorship, those approvals were directly by the city council. And so there was proposal development and agreements approved at that time. So there were a lot of different iterations. But in those agreements, we would try to assign a financial value to the any in-kind contribution on behalf of the city. So events that closed down streets, for example, received the racking at no rental charge. And what we've done is it is not the role of the Arts Commission or the grant process to award that kind of in-kind support from the city. That now has to go through, I think it's basically the special event permit application, you can request that support from the city. So it's basically open to anyone who wants to do an event, but it's a separate process. So, I mean, we could certainly talk about that more and what that looks like, but I think it's just Sweet Corn and Pygmalion that utilize the street racking and actually perform street closures. And then likewise, two of the programs have a relationship with the arts program, but they, all the programs have the ability to, or events of this nature, have the ability to partner with the arts program, and we'd actually be interested in doing that more broadly.
And we encourage them to, just to note, when they attend a grant orientation with me, they're encouraged to consider ways that the arts and culture program could become a part of the grant. And usually those are in-kind ways. So we'll ask for opportunities to have a presence there, to give a welcome, to have a table with information about the arts program. But it could also be that we're going to feature them on Art Now, or we're going to focus on having, different kinds of resources be given to them too. But to your point, Janelle, which I think is a wonderful point, one of the things that I'm hoping to do with you as our commission going forward is during our visioning in January to devote some specific time just to this process. And I'm going to make note of that question, and we can revisit it too then, because that and any questions you have more about process, I think they're just really important to note at this time so that we can revisit them for the next cycle.
Yeah,
Well
I
before
agree.
the next cycle,
I
sure.
agree, because you and I had a similar conversation, and
Yeah.
there's background information that maybe we need to know, maybe we don't. It's nice to know the parameters that we should consider, and then not worry about other ones when we make a decision about
Right.
funding, because there may be something that affects our decision. Had we known, we might have felt differently about it. So it's helpful.
Sure.
It's a hard process to go through and figure out the best ways to present it from our perspective as well.
Yeah, I can absolutely appreciate that this can be a challenging process. I'm curious if there's other things that you might want to elaborate about any of the feedback that you gave, either especially the quantitative or qualitative feedback that was included for the benefit of applicants or for the benefit of your discussion as you evaluate together this recommendation.
Can we have a minute to look through it?
For sure.
This might actually be, of course, you can't give us a compilation, but the funding history from the past, maybe giving it to us in advance might be useful as well.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
one less thing to consider today as well.
I'm going to make notes about both of those things.
The importance of the funding being spent in the TIF district. I noticed that came up a couple times, but from what I remember, it never really came up in any discussions of priorities of where we were looking for programming. So maybe that could be.
I thought.
See,
Useful.
Brandon.
I can speak to that. So of the total amount being awarded, which I don't recall the total amount, but is it 35,000?
35.
35.
Only 5,000 is general fund money, meaning it could be spent anywhere in the city. So the majority of these funds do need to be spent in the downtown. And 3 of these events are downtown events, and Pygmalion is off-site.
Kind of
So-
a hybrid of both.
And so, of course, we're interested in hearing more about what the downtown component will be, because only 5,000 of their total award, whatever's determined, can be the general fund or elsewhere in the city. So it was sort of implicit in there's only so many asking right now, so we didn't end up needing to discuss it. All the others are downtown events, and then the Pygmalion has to be the recipient of the general fund money.
And just to add to that, the applicant in question last cycle was met as part of an orientation, was told all of that information, so that when they were given, I believe, $9,950 last cycle, it was explained that $5,000 needs to be spent, because the only that can be spent outside of the downtown, the remainder needs to be spent in our downtown. And so you're actually receiving a final report from them next our next meeting. So you'll be able to see that was spent in our downtown.
How was allocated? Yeah, that was my understanding from the beginning. I mean, you and I have been here a
Uh,
while. I
yeah.
think we knew that that was the original intent when this commission was formed. So I guess maybe I took it for granted, but if it wasn't,
Well, for
wasn't clear
grant
enough.
applicants, right? I mean, if they don't know, to then say, here's some money, but now this much of it has to be spent in a place that you weren't planning on, that can be a big, big adjustment, you know. So for us, also for applicants as well.
Right. Well, I will say this. For the general arts grants, and we offer now over like 8 grant workshops. I just did 6. I'm going to do 2 more, plus I have drop-in hours. We go into great detail about the TIF funding and all of that information. So it is shared, and one of the things that we're doing this year is going to film my grant workshop, so it'll also be available online, and that information is in our application. So the applicants should be aware, reading the guidelines, that is a restriction of the grant that we're kind of coming from too. But maybe to your point, the actual set dollar amount, sure, we can definitely let that be more explicitly detailed on the website, that 5,000.
Yeah, I just want to make clear for everyone that that funding allocation is something the regular Tier 1 and 2 juries also have to deal with. And staff does back-end work there to try to take the jury's interests and see if the math works. Only when it doesn't work do we need to actively debate it or ask applicants to do different things.
We have a strong emphasis on the downtown TIF district.
Yeah, I know in a couple cases, I just wanted to emphasize that I get a little nervous when I see that in a couple cases, they're getting either a third of the funding or maybe half of the funding from us, just simply because we don't know from year to year if we can offer the same amount of money. And so I did mention in my notes about it that they should, in some cases, they should be looking for a more diverse funding stream, just because you never know what's going to happen in the future. Plus, honestly, when we first started the grants, we were thinking of it more as seed money and not necessarily sustaining over a long period of time. So, mainly because we only have a certain pot of money. So.
And I can very quickly mention 2 pieces of evaluation that are in this document, again, available online. But I want to just note our kind of notes that we saw as staff across all of the evaluations. And some of those were wanting to see some different kinds of evaluation or metrics of these events. And so that's a note that I'm making too for us, but it is a note for all of the applicants, being able to share some more details. There is really going to strengthen future applications, but for us, that can also influence this cycle's final reporting, so we can actually influence that at our visioning meeting, decide if we want more kinds of evaluation done. That conversation is early enough next year that folks have plenty of time to get to know any new evaluation process that we introduce. The other thing that I saw fairly across, there were some that did this better than others, but just in general having more detail in your budget. So I know that when we asked for we sped up the timeline this year actually at the request of some of our applicants, wanting to know a little bit more in advance whether they had this funding available, which is very reasonable. But then, what happens, of course, is that some of these events had just very recently happened this year. So the planning teams haven't exactly necessarily turned all their attention to planning next year's event yet. However, in our lower tiers, we say all of the time, we need the who, what, where, when, and why worked out as much as possible. We want to know what our funding is going towards. And we also want to know some specifics. So if we say, for instance, it's going towards performances, who's performing, where are they performing? Is it, for instance, in our TIF district, what's sort of happening there? Those details are pretty important. And then what are they being paid? So if we have just a certain amount allocated for performances, and I know this sometimes is difficult when people use bidding processes or other things, so we don't have to know things in super detail, but just knowing that there's going to be this many performances or this is going to happen at this location. A little more detail on some of the applications I think is very desirable, and I saw that in your evaluations as well, budgetary details. One of the things that we introduced this past year is there is a notes section on the expenditures, and I've been explaining in all of our grant workshops that those notes sections in the past used to say something like, if applicable. And I changed it to put notes here or like give details here, bolded, underlined, like nearly in red font, right? We really want as many details as possible. And that's just a note for all of you, but also anyone thinking of applying. This is really important as we're considering grant applications. Just knowing that we have a lot of those details worked out. That brings something from a wonderful idea to a plan that we know is a good investment for the city of Urbana. And I guess kind of curtailing on that advice is another thing that kind of came across, which in general, I saw that these 4 applicants and the festivals they represent are very beloved in different ways, and that they meet different populations at times, and that those things all have value for the commission. So we did also see different things that absolutely impressed the commission, especially as we consider some being like volunteer run or some having really robust committee work happening, or different ways in which these collaborations have really been nurtured over the years and what they bring to the arts community. So I just wanted, to reflect that back to you. That was something that we saw across the evaluations. Mm-hmm.
What are the boundaries of the TIF district?
Yeah, so there are TIF district maps, and it's more complicated than can be explained right now, but they are available on our website.
Just generally the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
The downtown.
That's the, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we actually ask the applicants. We don't ask them to look at a map.
Absolutely.
We just ask them to indicate if the project's in downtown or not. And again, we can check if we're down to the details.
But just as a note, there are maps available for download. We do talk about this in depth in the grant workshop, but I also advise people not to get too caught in the weeds about it, because just thinking downtown is pretty generally where we're talking. But if you have not yet, as a commissioner, attended one of my grants workshops, I really invite you to come, because I think it'll be very illuminating. Same with applicants. I know that many of our Tier 3 applicants either haven't been to a workshop or haven't been since I've been in this position. So I would love to see people come out to those workshops, because I think it will really just enhance their knowledge of the grant process. I answer a lot of questions there too.
Has it been recorded?
That's what we're working to do. That was what I mentioned. So yes, it will be recorded. Of course, I am always hesitant around those things, because I think in person is really important. And the other thing that happens is they do function as a networking. So we do have a lot of people actually find collaborators or make really great connections at those workshops. And that's something that gets reported as feedback back to me a lot.
So do you have the schedule for those grant workshops?
Yeah, so we just concluded all of them, but they were all on our website, on this grants page, as well as on Facebook and our social media pages, and on our online calendars. So we will have grant drop-in hours on Monday. This is not as relevant to today's discussion, but just for you to know, grant drop-in hours 9 to 4 p.m. at Cafe Paradiso. People can drop in. I'll be there all day. I'll have a slot sign-up sheet where they can sign up for no longer than a 15 to 30-minute conversation, and usually just to get questions answered. I like to see that some things have been brought together. But for other people, it's like, I have a great idea and I just need to brainstorm it a little bit with someone, and that's a fine conversation for us to have there too. But I'll do that once on next Monday, December 8th. I'll do it again on January 9th, which is another Monday. Yeah. Any other, though, feedback or questions before, or other discussion that you'd like to have about this recommendation?
Is there any way to provide like guidelines for doing the evaluations? Because it seems like the evaluation and the impact is improving, is a common trend in all the 4. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, if we provide some guides at the end for when they present the report, maybe is a good opportunity also for having this background information for evaluating future projects or...
Yeah, I agree. And I think we can have impact metrics added as a part of the overarching evaluation that the commission gives. One thing that we may need to do with that, and will be maybe taking some impact information and asking it to be compiled from previous years. I'm just going to pick on Folk and Roots for a second, but in the case of Folk and Roots, this application was due less than like a week after they concluded their Folk and Roots Festival. So with the new timeline, which again came at the request of some of our applicants, this does present sometimes a problem. We don't have the benefit of final reports for this past cycle. We can change that and ask for final reports a little more quickly. I don't think that it will work for something like CU Folk and Roots that was so recent. But, you know, at this point, we're a little ways away from, you know, Pygmalion and Sweet Corn certainly, and Boneyard was a while back. So we should be able to get those evaluatory pieces so that you can be influenced by those things as well. All of these festivals have been around for a few years, so it's also possible to ask them to go back and give more information. And we can determine at our visioning meeting kind of the type of metrics that you'd like to see to inform your decision.
Question, please?
Go ahead.
Should we consider, or how much, if at all, if an artist or a group is brought in from out of town, when we're evaluating the return on the investment, for example, if it's a local festival and everyone's from here, obviously the revenue will return to our community as well, whereas when a festival brings in a lot of outside performers, the revenue goes out of the community. And I don't know how much of that to even consider when we're evaluating.
Well, I think I would say that we also have to keep in mind that we do want to promote this as a place for arts. And if I don't think necessarily having outside groups here is a bad idea because, you know, frankly, you know, if we're bringing in nationally known groups, that's going to bring in more people than otherwise, obviously. And so I think you have to kind of balance it. It's not just the money coming to the community, but also what this does for the community's reputation as a place for art. True. So,
and of course, tourism is an income generator for a community. It's a driver of economic development. So we'll see things like hotel stays, dinners, and other things as a result of people coming in from out of town to go see that recognizable name, right?
I want to see that big picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think those things actually can be in conversation together. There's value in both the local and the and economic development value in both. Mm-hmm. Did you have a question, Frank? Okay. I thought I saw this. Any other comments?
Go ahead, Janelle.
Because we know the earlier timeline next year, will the grants or the paperwork be available for a little bit longer of a time period? For
which paperwork? Are you referring
the
to?
applications. Will the applications be made available for more time?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I'm making note of any process-related comments, but are there any other comments on your evaluations that you'd like to detail or discuss as a group? And I'm going to read these back to you so that we know kind of some things that we want to bring back up during our visioning. Would you like me to read back the feedback I've heard so far? This is just about our process for a moment.
It might be time to see if there's an interest in making a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking at this point.
Very good.
Okay, well, let me ask, first of all, isn't there any objection if we just vote on this as a whole rather than each one separately?
I'm in favor of
Okay.
looking at it as a whole.
Okay. I just wanted to get a feel for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead then and move that we approve the recommendation of Tier 3 Urbana Arts Grants as presented by staff.
I second that motion.
All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion's passed.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for this feedback on our process. I'm looking forward to our visioning in January, and we will spend some substantial time on Tier 3. I think each year, hopefully, we're getting a little bit more savvy and aware of how we want to do the Tier 3 grant process. And this is always a work in progress and looking to improve each year. So thank you for your participation and time. I want to also thank all of the applicants and reiterate again that official notice will go out today and by, at the latest, the end of the business day tomorrow.
Okay,
I just want to state on the audio record that the motion passed unanimously.
thank you. Okay, I move that we adjourn. Can I have a second?
Second.
We are done. Thanks very much for everybody for coming.
Thank you.